Good morning. I'd like to call this hearing to order. Welcome to our C-SPAN friends in the back of the room. The cameras are rolling, so everyone be on your best behavior. And I call this hearing to order right now. We're waiting for some of our colleagues to get here. I think they're on their way, but I usually don't start off by calling attention to the title of our hearing today, but I think it is one of the most important issues facing the country. And so today we're having a hearing on shrinking the skills gap, solutions to the small business workforce shortage. And we got a great panel before us this morning. And so I'd like to welcome everybody. And let's get underway. The American economy is creating jobs at historic rates. Over 1 million jobs have been created so far this year. The unemployment rate is at an 18-year low of 3.8%, and there are now more vacant jobs than unemployed job seekers in the United States. That's the good news. On June 1st, there was even an article in the New York Times with the title, "We Ran Out of Words to Describe How Good the Jobs Numbers Are." Small business optimism is at an all-time high. Tax reform has created an opportunity for small businesses to hire that extra employee or make that needed expansion or renovation. The problem is when there are 6.6 million job vacancies, small businesses have a particularly difficult time finding and retaining qualified employees. According to the National Federation of Independent Business, 57% of surveyed small business owners either hired workers or were trying to hire workers in the last month. However, 88% of those hiring or trying to hire reported few to no qualified applicants for vacant positions. This raises a significant secondary issue. According to the American Enterprise Institute, there are 7 million men currently missing from the workforce. The female labor force participation rate has declined by 6% since 2000. Also, 1 in 7 16 to 24-year-olds are neither in school nor working, which could have serious economic implications for decades to come. These groups are not even included in our labor market. We do not want to forget them either. Our committee has held several hearings in the past few months that have examined the workforce shortage and the skills gap. This morning, we have brought together an excellent panel to learn more about how to solve this problem. Through today's hearing, we hope to hear ideas that will ensure America's small businesses have a workforce with the right skill set to propel the American economy forward. To be clear, this hearing is not about a few tweaks here and there. These distortions in the labor market affect every state, every congressional district, and the nearly 30 million small businesses in our nation. I thank you all for being here this morning, and I yield to the ranking member for his opening remarks. Mr. Evans.
Good morning. Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. As our nation strives to regain its global competitiveness, it is critical that companies of all sizes have access to the skilled workforce they need to succeed. In fact, in the next decade, nearly 2/3 of all job vacancies will require some post-secondary education, and this will only increase as the pace of technology changes accelerate. Small business creates 70% of all new jobs, and it's essential that these workers have sufficient technical skills. Analyzing the United States workforce reveals two areas of concern: an existing skill gap among workers and a large increase in the retirement of baby boomers within the next decade. Both emphasize the importance of transforming the education process and requirements for future workers. For businesses, this reality has dire consequences. If we are able to meet the demand for trained workers, it will weaken our ability to compete globally. The manufacturing, technology, and healthcare sectors in particular face challenging obstacles to this deficiency. And what is essentially troubling is that there are fewer workers seeking jobs, compounding the problems further. With the unemployment rate at a low of 3.8%, small businesses will be at even more of a disadvantage as they compete for any workers, especially those with training. This begs the question, how do we address this skill gap now to get people qualified for these jobs? Targeted post-secondary education, such as skill certificate systems, can assist small firms in securing qualified employees to help them grow. Novel partnerships among industry, educators, and policymakers are also playing a role by preparing the workforce and incentivize school completion. Too many American workers and small businesses have been left behind. That's why creating incentives for training, certification, and apprenticeship programs leads to a stronger workforce, better learning, higher productivity. Most important, we must change the stigma surrounding these jobs and refocus the discussion for our future generation as they need it. Efforts such as these we will discuss today are critical to our economic recovery. By preparing America's workforce to compete in the global marketplace, firms will be better positioned to succeed, paving the way for stronger growth. Prudent investments in training and education will also reduce the unemployment rate, leading to higher consumer confidence and demand. This is exactly what our nation needs. Now that we look to turn the corner, create more jobs, ensure that America's small businesses are prepared to move our economy forward. I look forward to today's hearing and thank the witnesses for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing this very important panel together, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Dwight. If committee members have an opening statement prepared, I ask they be submitted for the record. I'd like to take a moment to explain the timing lights for each of you today. You'll each have 5 minutes to deliver your testimony. The light will start out green. When you have 1 minute remaining, the light will turn yellow. Finally, at the end of your 5 minutes, it will turn red. I ask you try to adhere somewhat to that, but we're flexible. I think we got a pretty flexible hearing today with plenty of time to spare. And so with that, let's get to introducing our first witness. Our first witness today is Mr. Todd Hitt, CEO of Kidder Capital in Falls Church, Virginia. Kidder Capital is a global asset management firm that manages investments in private equity, real estate, infrastructure, and hospitality. They have expertise on labor markets across all of these sectors and are a good lead off to explain what's going on in the real world this morning. Mr. Hitt frequently speaks across the country and writes about how to improve the American economy, create opportunities for the middle class, and is a bold, innovative voice on navigating America's greatest economic challenges. And so we welcome you today, and thank you for joining us, Mr. Hitt, and you may begin.
Well, good morning, Chairman Barat, Ranking Member Evans. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning and talk with you about this critical problem our country is facing. My name is Todd Hitt. I'm the founder of and CEO of Kidder Capital, a private equity firm based in Washington, D.C. area. Kidder manages a wide variety of assets across established and emerging asset classes, including venture, real estate, construction, and energy. Through my work, it's become clear to me that the United States is facing a critical labor shortage that could well topple the economy if we don't fix it. There are pockets of the country that have few jobs and too many workers, but there are far more with many jobs and too few workers. Labor shortages mean small businesses can't expand, and they constrain economic growth in a visceral way. Turning down work is the last thing an entrepreneur and business owner wants to do, but when you don't have the labor you need, it's one of the only options you have. My goal today is to offer practical solutions to address our labor shortage. First, let me briefly illustrate the scope of the problem we face. In April, there were 6.7 million jobs open in the United States, and while the unemployment number doesn't include workers who've simply dropped out of the workforce, it was the first time since 2000 that the number of jobs open exceeded the number of workers. I cite many of these stories in my written testimony. The firms Kidder Capital has worked with have lived the labor shortage, and it's definitely an issue that the CEOs and investors I know talk about constantly. In my written testimony, I've included a graphic that shows the ratio of unemployed individuals to jobs available. 2 years after the Great Recession was over, there were 4 unemployed workers for every U.S. job open. Today, it's less than a 1-to-1 ratio. The worker shortage affects all regions of the country. In my written testimony, I've also included graphics showing the divergence between the prime age population and the number of workers in large cities and mid-sized cities and suburbs and in rural America. Everywhere, there's a gap between jobs and the prime age working population. As I noted above, these shortages hit small businesses the hardest. As candidates for office, you're familiar with the issue of name ID. Well-known candidates have an instant advantage. The same principle applies to hiring workers. When you're smaller, a potential employee is less likely to be familiar with your reputation and your name. Many people perceive working for a smaller business, especially a startup, or a far riskier challenge, of course. Main Street employers also have a harder time absorbing the wage inflation that goes along with the labor shortage. There are economists who will argue today's shortage could be solved if employers simply offer higher wages. But higher wages can't attract workers who aren't there. And more often than not, higher wages impact pricing and make the business's thesis untenable. There are several factors that contribute to the nation's labor shortage. Today I will address one, labor mobility. This is one we don't hear enough about, I think. If you remember one statistic from my remarks today, I want it to be this. In 2017, fewer Americans moved than in any year in at least the last 50 years. The U.S. mover rate is now 11%. That's an historic low, and it's half of what it was just 30 years ago. Instead of moving in search of a new job, today's out-of-work Americans are more likely to drop out of the workforce. The University of California at Berkeley's Enrico Moretti even has connected the decline in labor mobility to increased income equality. Family ties, family ties, housing costs, and level of education all impact a family's willingness to move. But I believe if we make it easier for them to move, Americans will get moving again. Businesses clearly have a role when it comes to encouraging mobility. We must attract talent with fair wages, family-sustaining benefits, and the promise of a stable job. But I believe lawmakers need to work in tandem with American job creators to solve this problem. The first solution is to reinstitute the tax deduction individuals can receive for work-related moving expenses. I was a vocal supporter of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, but I believe doing away with that deduction was a mistake. As you know, when you tax something, you generally get less of it. When you incentivize it, you get more. Mobility incentives will help unstick our workers. One way to pay for these grants is to let unemployed individuals collect their state and federal unemployment benefits up front if they are using them to move to another location in order to take a job. The U.S. Labor Department executed a small-scale mobility grant program in the 1970s. The Job Search and Relocation Assistance Program involved 40 different unemployment offices across several southern states. Different offices offered different types of assistance, ranging from providing information about jobs to actually giving individuals grants to take jobs in other places. A 1981 analysis of the program found wages for those who relocated through the program were higher. Local, state, and federal levels of government provide tax incentives to businesses to provide worker training. Similar incentives should be given to employers who spend capital to relocate workers. Very, very important issue. Differing rules for federal programs like Medicaid and Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program create a major barrier to keep people from moving. And while Section 8 rental housing vouchers promote mobility within metro areas, the long waiting lists in most areas are a strong disincentive against relocation. High housing costs are a major reason families don't move to cities with robust job markets. I'm running out of time here, Chairman. I maybe have another 40 seconds. High housing costs are a major reason families don't move to cities with robust job markets. In The Atlantic last fall, Alana Samuels pointed out that states like Texas, which have less strict zoning laws, have high in-migration rates. Cities should loosen land use regulations. It's not only urban areas that struggle to provide housing for new workers. The Wall Street Journal's Shandy Rice found that in Platte County, Nebraska, there are around 990 jobs available, but only a total of 65 homes for sale. Housing prices are rising so fast in Nebraska that the state is considering incentives for home builders to build. Reducing occupational licensing regulations also will reduce disincentives for professionals to move. I want to thank you again for the opportunity to testify here this morning. The labor shortage and lack of labor mobility should concern Republicans and Democrats alike. This is a non-tribal issue. It's an issue we must tackle to increase growth rates and to improve income inequality. Thank you for your time and consideration today and for your service to our great country.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Hitt. It's good to have a non-tribal win-win, and I think you hit the nail on the labor mobility piece. And so we'll be coming back to you on the Q&A part. Next witness today is Kelly McWright, President and CEO of Hamilton Riker IT Solutions in Nashville, Tennessee. Hamilton Riker is an information technology staffing firm and also provides businesses with recruiting, management consulting, and information technology solutions. Thank you for joining us today and for lending your expertise, Mr. McWright, and you may begin. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman Bratt, Ranking Member Evans, and other members of the committee. Again, I am Kelly McWright. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Hamilton Riker, and I'm also current Chairman of the American Staffing Association. It's my privilege to represent both organizations this morning. Founded in 1971, Hamilton Riker is a total workforce solution and industry leader for the provision of industrial, administrative, and information technology staffing, as well as recruiting, management consulting, and IT solutions. We're headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee. We have 35 locations across the U.S. For 45 years, we've helped thousands of people find great jobs and great careers while providing our customers, many of which are small businesses, with a staffing solution concentrating on manufacturing, distribution, clerical, and skilled trade disciplines. The American Staffing Association is a national trade association that has been the voice of the U.S. staffing industry for more than 50 years, promoting the interest of the industry and flexible employment opportunities through legal and legislative advocacy, public relations, education, and the establishment of high standards of ethical conduct. The ASA strongly supports policies that help America's workers and is working closely with the Department of Labor and other federal agencies on the development of a new and expanded apprenticeship program. The staffing industry employs more than 3 million employees per day and more than 15 million each year. Staffing firms recruit and hire their own employees and assign them to businesses to assist in special work situations such as employee absences, skill shortages, and seasonal workloads, or to perform special assignments or projects. Employees work in virtually every skill level and job category, including industrial labor, office support, engineering, IT, legal, and accounting. Most everyone is aware of the latest reports highlighting the current situation in the workforce. Basically, there's more jobs than people. We see that firsthand at Hamilton Riker in almost all of our markets. We're in a lot of small towns in Tennessee, Mississippi, and Kentucky, as well as in larger cities like Houston and Nashville. With the economy at full employment, we're taking measures to upskill the existing workforce. For instance, by taking workers that may have a certain skill set and providing them training to allow them to be promoted or move into another position at a higher wage rate. Additionally, we have instituted soft skill orientations that address issues like conflict resolution, workplace violence, and even basic workplace practices such as on-time arrival to work, call-in procedures, and how to deal with differing workplace cultures. This morning, I wanted to highlight specific measures our company is taking in Tupelo, Mississippi, in order to assess skills and train workers for one of our manufacturing clients. Last year, our company partnered with IVR Train, a spinoff company from Tennessee Tech University that develops virtual reality training for manufacturers. For those of you that don't know, virtual reality is an interactive, computer-generated experience taking place within a simulated environment that incorporates auditory, visual, and other types of sensory feedback. Current VR technology most commonly uses headsets or multi-projected environments, sometimes in combination with physical environments or props to generate realistic images and other sensations that simulate a user's physical presence in a virtual or imaginary environment. In Tupelo, we specifically were interested in how VR could assist us in recruiting, testing, and training forklift drivers. We purchased a VR forklift and installed it in our office in early January. The VR forklift has 8 assessments that test a variety of forklift skills from beginner to advanced. Prior to purchasing the VR forklift, we could only interview our applicants and then send them out to our client for testing on the actual machine. We are now better able to assess the applicant's skills using the VR technology, resulting in a 70% plus pass rate for our applicants versus less than 50% in 2017. This summer, we are implementing a training program for those workers who may have had previous forklift experience but need to upgrade their skills before being placed at client sites. I've included a short video that will give the committee a better understanding of how the VR forklift operates. This is just one of the examples our company and other members of the ASA are doing to train workers for tomorrow's jobs and help close those skills gaps. Thank you for your time. So I don't believe there's any sound, but this is the actual machine in our office. And so it fits on about a 12 by 12 space. And he's putting on the glasses, and he's going through one of the test assessments. So the major cost for this is the computer, obviously, and the video card that's inside there. So the costs are $15,000 to $20,000, which includes the simulator and the computer equipment. We have 8 assessments that we can test. He's passed. He did. I included the one that passed. So I want to show you. Well, that's what he's looking. That's what it looks like. So the first assessment is go through the cones and can he turn the forklift, and then it gets progressively harder each time, including going into a trailer, picking up a pallet, backing it out. So if they pass the first 3, then we'll send them on for testing on the physical machine. So, thank you.
Super. Thanks for your testimony, Mr. McCright. Our next witness is Angela Dine-Schmeiser. Ms. Dine-Schmeiser is President and CEO of St. Mary's Foundry, Inc., an iron casting producer in St. Mary's, Ohio. Under her leadership, St. Mary's Foundry recently established the St. Mary's Foundry Technical Institute, which encourages employees to set goals and take classes outside of their department specialty to be well-rounded while remaining experts in their field. Thank you for being with us today, and you may begin your testimony. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman Bratt, Ranking Member Evans, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today to discuss the skills gap and workforce shortage facing the U.S. metal casting industry and for taking the time and energy to address this challenge. As announced, I'm Angela Dine-Schmeiser, fourth generation president of St. Mary's Foundry. My great-grandfather started our manufacturing facility in 1917 in St. Mary's, Ohio. I care about the state of manufacturing in our country, which is why I'm here today, and which is why I actively participate in the American Foundry Society and serve on the board and as president of the Ohio Cast Metals Association. Ohio remains among the top 3 states for manufacturing employment in the country, and is also home to over 150 metal casting facilities, which is the highest concentration of metal casters in the nation. Metal casting is one of our nation's oldest and most important industries, as castings made from iron, steel, or aluminum alloys are used to produce 90% of manufactured durable goods and nearly all manufacturing machinery in the U.S. Today, St. Mary's Foundry employs 160 associates and manufactures iron castings ranging from 500 to 60,000 pounds. We melt scrap metal, add necessary alloys, and transform them into key components such as compression cylinders for the natural gas pipeline and diffusers for flood control. If you've ever used natural gas, I can proudly say one of our fine castings has touched your lives. As you know, America's labor shortage has reached a record high, and as Chairman Bratt said, with U.S. unemployment rate dropping to an 18-year low of 3.8% in May, this is a real challenge. If you gather a group of metal casters and ask them what their biggest challenge is today, more than 80% will cite the talent shortage of both skilled and unskilled workers. This shortage threatens to slow the economy, impede manufacturers' ability to deliver on customer demands, burn out our workers, and hurt our bottom line through lost revenues and lost opportunities. At St. Mary's Foundry, we have a great working environment with competitive wages and benefits, and we are still struggling to fill job openings. We are challenged on a number of fronts: an aging workforce, local housing shortages, a local unemployment rate averaging 2.8%, the drug epidemic, and less people choosing manufacturing careers due to the perception that manufacturing is outdated and legacy work. With the combination of all these factors, the shortage of skilled and unskilled workers has turned into a perfect storm. We currently have 16 openings for a variety of jobs specific to our industries, such as casting finishers and mold makers. In January, we held a job fair. We promoted the fair on our Facebook page, put up billboards along the interstate, and encouraged our employees through incentives to promote our job openings on social media. Our job fair resulted in 76 applicants, which we felt was successful. However, out of those 76 applicants, 46 failed the on-site drug test, and 6 applicants didn't follow up on the next step of the interview process. We ended up hiring 24 applicants, and now, primarily due to attendance issues, only 4 of these individuals remain employed at the Foundry today. As you can see from the results of our job fair, finding applicants, especially drug-free applicants, is a real struggle. Typically, only 25 to 30% of prospective employees can pass the drug test. Given the fact that we have heavy equipment and molten metal in foundries, it is vitally important that our workers are drug-free. Our industry is stepping up and making a commitment to actively reach out to introduce the metal casting process to local elementary, middle schools, high schools, and other venues. Foundries are working with their local labor departments, technical colleges, veteran organizations, and correctional facilities for referrals. We are providing in-house training, including apprenticeships for our more technical positions, and paying for our associates to go to technical classes. There is a role for Congress to help facilitate the rebuilding of this pipeline of students into manufacturing by refocusing resources into vocational and technical programs available to high schools and community colleges across the country. We appreciate the House passing the Strengthening Career and Technical Education for the 21st Century Act, also known as the Carl Perkins Career and Technical Education Bill, which provides resources for secondary schools and community colleges to teach manufacturing skills and other technical trades. I understand that the Senate Help Committee is scheduled to act on several Perkins Career and Technical Education bills on June 20th, and I hope that the Senate will vote to move forward on bipartisan legislation soon. In addition, it would be helpful if Congress would fully fund the Perkins Career and Technical Education Act. Increasing student participation in work-based learning opportunities would go a long way to help increase interest in manufacturing job opportunities. I personally believe we should also consider connecting these educational programs to drug rehabilitation programs and behavioral correction programs for exponential success. I want to thank you again for the opportunity to be here today and share our company and industry workforce challenges, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much for that compelling testimony. It's very good. And now I'd like to yield to our ranking member, Mr. Evans, for introduction of the final witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Brian Greenlee, owner and administrator of Always Best Care, a senior service healthcare serving Greater Philadelphia. He has a TV and radio show, Did You Know?, connecting people to home, community, and business resource. Mr. Bryan is the advisory board with 1199C, a ASME affiliate labor management partnership. They provide training to community members as well as union members to help secure a skilled workforce, something his industry is in dire need of acquiring. Mr. Greenlee is a graduate of Philadelphia University, where he received his MBA. Welcome, Mr. Greenlee.
Good morning, Chairman Bratt, Ranking Member Evans, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for convening today's hearing on small business workforce development needs and how to address the skills gap. My name is Brian Green, and I am the owner of Always Best Care Senior Services in both Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and throughout Delaware. Always Best Care Senior Services is one of the nation's leading providers of non-medical in-home care, assisted living placement services, and skilled home health care. It is my honor for me to be here today to testify before the subcommittee and to share my experience as a private sector employer working to address the skills gap in my industry. As the owner of Always Best Care, I have more than 25 years of day-to-day operations experience, which includes staffing and workforce development in a healthcare environment. In addition to my experience in home health care, I currently serve on the Public Policy Committee, Political Action Committee Board of the Pennsylvania Home Care Association. I am a member of the Board of Trustees of the Philadelphia University Legacy Board, now acquired by Thomas Jefferson University, the Overbrook School for the Blind in Philadelphia, the McGee Rehabilitation Hospital Foundation Board of Directors, and the Board of Philadanco. Growing up, I was a part of the family who qualified for 1199C benefits, which provide eligible union members with comprehensive educational services in the healthcare field. As a result, my mother, grandmother, and I were able to attend college in the same time frame, giving us a chance to persist and succeed in our chosen fields. Without access to this type of targeted training, I would not be where I am today. Middle skill jobs like those Always Best Care Senior Services account for 53% of the United States labor market, but only 43% of the country's workers are trained at the middle skill level. In healthcare industries, this skills gap is even more pronounced. Home healthcare is one of the fastest growing industries in the U.S. As the labor market has tightened, employers like Always Best Care increasingly struggle to identify hires with credentials and work experience, both of which are required to earn licenses. When there are more workers looking for jobs, new entrants earned work experience in helper roles, enabling a constant stream of newly licensed workers to meet middle-skilled demand. With lower levels of unemployment, the pipeline no longer exists. For small and middle-sized businesses like Always Best Care, in particular, the skill care gap can create daunting challenges when it comes to hiring and retaining workers. Challenges in recruiting workers. First, quality in-home care requires the right kind of person. Always Best Care looks for kind, compassionate caregivers who treat clients with dignity and respect. We provide in-home care services, both companion and personal care. We serve patients with Alzheimer's, dementia, and cancer. In addition to comfort and companionship, we offer dressing, escort transportation, errands, bathing and grooming, incontinence care, light housekeeping, grocery shopping and meal preparation, laundry, and medication reminders. Recruiting the right person for this work requires significant outreach to our communities, a detailed interview process, and a structured onboarding process. Always Best Care has over 1,000 caregivers, but we can't do this on our own. We have worked with the PA Career Link, diversity career fairs, social organizations, and training programs like 1199C to recruit individuals into the field. These community partnerships help us identify a diverse set of workers across our service area and fill roles in the company. I also work with community organizations and reentry programs that serve individuals who have been released from incarceration. The Pennsylvania Older Adult Protective Services Act, OPSA, requires all home care agencies to complete criminal background checks prior to hire. However, a 2015 court decision by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, known as Peek v. Commonwealth, found lifetime bans on unemployment unconstitutional. Although background checks are still required, the Department of Aging now recommends that providers perform a risk assessment if they choose to hire an individual with a prior criminal conviction. While we are awaiting more guidance from the state, we believe this is a step in the right direction and urge federal policymakers to consider similar measures when it comes to addressing barriers to hiring. Challenges training new and incumbent workers. Training new workers in the home health care requires dedication and intensity. All of the jobs at Always Best Care call for on-the-job training to ensure each client has the access to quality, personalized individual home care program. Every one of our team members and caregivers receive comprehensive training before assigned on a care plan. Our workers also achieve periodic reviews and upskilling opportunities. To help provide, I'm about to run out of time, sorry. To help provide greater opportunities for our workers, I sit on the advisory board of 1199C Training and Upgrading Fund, AFSCME, Affiliated Labor Management Partnership. I, along with several other business leaders, work with 1199C to staff to identify core competencies in home health care workers and translate into curriculum and training 1199C can deliver, complemented by the training my team can deliver workers on the job. This partnership is vital, but takes significant work. Currently, 1199C is a funding portion of their work and subsidizing the cost of training through Federal Department of Labor grants and with funding from Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. I urge policy makers to continue investments in our workforce and apprenticeship systems as they are crucial to supporting the efforts of small business workers to close the skills gap. Challenges retaining workers. Retaining workers is also a tremendous challenge. Much of my workforce consists of part-time workers since the average care plan is 3 to 6 hours a day. Additionally, because of low Medicaid reimbursement rates, home care agencies can only afford to pay $10 to $12 an hour on average. Given the nature of tasks caregivers must perform daily, I feel this level of compensation is inadequate, not enough, and does not provide an incentive for individuals to remain in the field. These workers can easily find higher pay in retail and food service industries, which is one of the main reasons the industry has a turnover rate of 70%. Also, the insufficient Medicaid reimbursement rate makes it difficult for home care agencies to cover the increasing costs of providing care and services to seniors. Within the last 6 months, additional background check and child abuse clearance requirements for home health care workers have been handed down by the state of Pennsylvania. While these background checks are undeniably important, the cost of hiring just one direct care worker is projected to increase by $43 in 2019. Yet Medicaid reimbursement rates are set to stay the same. In conclusion, we can all agree that home health care workers are crucial to providing high quality to some of the most vulnerable members of our society. I am here today to tell you that our industry is facing significant hurdles when it comes to building and maintaining a strong pipeline of workers, and there is no doubt in my mind that this will adversely affect millions of Americans if not corrected. I ask that the federal policymakers work to help provide education and training opportunities to individuals from all backgrounds who are likely to find and retain gainful employment. We cannot afford to miss this opportunity too close to our nation's growing skills gap. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Green, for your testimony. All four of you together put together, I don't want to say depressing package, but a set of challenges, right, from mobility through Ms. Deinschmeiser. I think you gave us quite a list, and I'll just go over that and just kind of at a gut feel. If you each just want, we'll start with Mr. Hitton. If you want to move down, you started off with 76 applicants, And then the whole panel brought up showing up on time, quitting, 70% turnover, the stigma of going to college versus getting technical skills in K to 12, people being skill ready, huge drop off due to the drug issue, labor mobility. And so you're at the federal government right now. And in some ways, we can be very helpful on certain policy levers, and on others, it's very blunt. So, like on education, K to 12, we probably control 10% of the funding, et cetera, right? And then state and local is 90%. But we do put mandates down, right? And we lifted mandates last year. And so the only required testing going forward under last year's education bill for K to 12 now is going to be math and reading, et cetera. And schools are free to do and have a little more flexibility. So I'm curious to hear your, right, if we're spending $13,000 a year per kid for 13 years, what can we do to get folks ready for the labor market in a better way at K to 12? And then higher ed, you gave some hints as to where the Perkins loans and those kind of things. Higher ed, how can we shift things? And then these are a lot of Band-Aid programs, and Mr. Hitt's kind of getting at the bigger package of labor mobility, making sure we're getting people to the right labor markets in the first place. But there's a daunting task, right? When you go from 76 apps to 46 drugs to showing up on time, setting the alarm clock in the morning, work ethic is involved. And this is common, right? This is what we hear, and that's why we're having this hearing. It is a daunting challenge. And so, Mr. Hitt, if the federal government, I mean, and don't limit yourself to what the federal government can do, but where would you, right, in economics, you do efficiency and you aim for the low-hanging fruit first. Where would you aim our resources to get the biggest bang for the buck in terms of improving this situation?
Well, Chairman Bratt, for me, ultimately, the number of people in the country feeling disenfranchised because of the labor issues we have go to the American dream. The American dream is the belief that your children will do better than you. They will always be set up to do better than you. And when you lose that vision of that American dream and people think that they can't possibly do better than their parents did, and their parents can't do better, aren't mobile enough to move to a higher paying job in a better spot, then I think you do get this inertia that we have in the country right now. And in middle America, many people are stuck. From my perspective, I would be incentivizing big business to get these people moved. And that, to me, are tax credits, tax breaks, maybe on a multiple, to go ahead and move people. If you think about it right now, there are people in the country who, their houses are still upside down in pockets of the country. So the idea of moving from maybe Youngstown to Seattle, it's untenable because your house is still $50,000 upside down and you're working 2 jobs. So these are huge problems, I think. I also think to the problem that Ms. Deinschmeiser has, I think that you're really talking about great education and marketing at the education level, K through 12. We need to change the way we educate people, and we need to let them see the future of what can happen in our job markets. We're rolling through a very digitized economy right now, and it's going to move far faster than we ever saw the economy move through the Industrial Revolution. It's going to move in 15 years, where the Industrial Revolution took us 35. It's going to move quickly. So we want to let them know that through spot education that there are great opportunities coming for them in other areas, in other industries. So that's where I would start, because I think when you have 46 applicants or over 50% failing a drug test, you have a far bigger problem. And to me, that goes right back to the American dream. They need to believe that there is great hope and that their future will be better and better. It's in our DNA. It's why we're Americans. It's why we originally came here. We all came here from somewhere, right? Over 200 years ago. It's in our DNA to move. And I think I made the point in my testimony, my written testimony, that we were moving at rates of 22%. That's almost 1 in 4 Americans every year moved. It's almost like that sort of gold rush dream. I've got to move for a better opportunity. The impacts of this are huge. Think about a recession. When you have a recession and you're in it, you might be in a recession for 3 years. But when people are moving to find that better opportunity, they're picking up GDP by going where jobs are instead of just staying stuck in that spot. So you actually have recessions are actually balanced out when people are moving. So to me, mobility is the #1 issue we have. It's not talked about enough, and I'd like to see it be at the forefront, and I'd like to see these solutions start to be tested and start to be implemented so we can actually get these people moving again and get them in better spots and better jobs.
All right, thank you much. We'll circle around to everyone else on the panel with that question coming up too, but I want to yield to our ranking member. Dwight, why don't you kick it off?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hinton, I want to go to something that this committee was conducting a discussion last week and see if you can reconcile this balance. We just held a hearing on millennium entrepreneurship. We talked about the gig economy. And we found that many are choosing to work for themselves for many reasons. How do we balance the need for encouraging more startup activity with that ensuring the next generation of workers also consider the skilled workforce?
Yeah, I think it's I think it's a tough one. You know, we went through unfortunately we went through a financial crisis in 6, 7, and 8. You know, and millennials were caught up. I hate to call them millennials; they're just the next generation, young, hard-working Americans. You know, they were caught up in a time that was tough for them. Many of them went through foreclosures on their homes. Many of them saw their parents lose their jobs. Many of them watched some big business get sort of taken out and taken out to pasture a little bit and. For failures that they had, and so they lost some of their faith in big business. So the idea of working for yourself is actually a great thing for them. And I think it's a natural reaction to human nature to feel that way, right? So I think what we need to be doing are simple things to bring them back into big business, to help train them so that they're actually in a better position to go out and take advantage of the gig economy. Part of that is making sure that we're talking about all the wonderful things that are happening in big business. Congressman, that 99% of big business and small business, they're wonderful actors. They're conscious, about their capitalist pursuits, and so I'd like to see more of that and more discussion of that on broader themes. And then I think from the perspective of startup activity, we didn't incentivize investment in startup activity. I mean, we are involved in that. We're involved in the venture world in a very big way. And, from our perspective, there's great opportunity in that world, and we want to attract millennials into that space as well. So we have both these spaces that we want to, be incentivizing them to jump in and get into the labor force.
Mr. Green, talk a little bit to me. How can you speak about the important training programs for the chronicle unemployed that can help aid the growth of our economy?
So the stigma associated with technical training in place of a 4-year degree will be a difficult one to erase in today's youth. However, the growing cost of post-secondary education, young adults are beginning to recognize that the technical careers can play in reducing or even preventing student loan debt and starting them on an earlier path to financial independence. Successful training programs need to take advantage of their graduates and alumni and use peer reviews to entice other young adults into the field. Students do not respond well to schools and counselors pushing them toward technical training, but they appreciate the experience of their peers in their generation who have taken this option and can prove that in a promising career. I just think that, these organizations that exist, you have to make them more available, make them more known. The community partnerships, the not-for-profits, all of that out there, you just have to evangelize it better amongst the growing workforce.
Use the interesting word you said, evangelize you. I think we're at that point that we have to do that, huh?
We have to, and we have to. I say that because you look at how we're communicating as a whole. I mean, how the traditional putting an ad in the paper for programs or jobs is just, in my opinion, obsolete amongst the young folks. They want to see things, or they look for jobs on Craigslist, at least in my workforce, which is highly part-time. So when I say evangelize, yes, of course, evangelizing on social media, talk, on radio, TV. Every time you turn on the TV now, you hear one or more programs. But sometimes to young people, that translates to debt. So I think that they have to see the reward to really you can't get instant gratification all the time in this workforce. You have to put in the time. And I think that's the balance of what millennials don't see. They want instant gratification. As you asked the question about entrepreneurship, it's the freedom. As I talk to them a lot of times I'm connecting young people in my season I'm connecting young people a lot of times to older folks, which is a kind of a intergenerational vibe, if you will. But when you talk to young people and you listen to them, they want the freedom of the entrepreneur spirit as opposed to routine. So I guess it's nonconformity and bringing them into the workforce to know that they have value.
I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. I'd like to now yield to my good friend from South Carolina, Ralph Norman.
Thank you, Chairman Bratt. I want to thank the panel for taking the time to come today. It's valuable to hear your comments. I'm a contractor, and you know the challenge that I see for hiring people is if you're 19 and have never worked, it's kind of hard to get them in the routine. That's a society problem to have people work as they come up, but that's an issue now. But Mr. McWright, we have in our area colleges, technical schools, and do you find businesses partnering with them to, one, let the millennials know that a welder, a framer, truck driver with a CDL can make 80 to own up 1,000 a year? Have y'all partnered with them, and if not, how do we spur that on?
Yes, we definitely have partnered with them. I can remember, maybe 15, 20 years ago, if you had openings, you would just send the openings over to the community college, and then they would send you some applicants, and that was how you would hire from them. And it's not like that anymore because everybody wants to access that pool that's there. And so it's almost a cradle-to-career kind of approach. You've got to get in there early. In high school, I think there's a stigma, maybe I'll speak to the manufacturing piece, that it's not cool to be in manufacturing. But you're exactly right. There are so many great jobs that you don't have to go to college for. And I know states have, in our state of Tennessee, we've promoted that. I know the other southeast states have promoted that because of the influx of the automotive jobs that we've seen over really the last 25 or 30 years. But we've got to do a better job of making it cool to be in manufacturing, and you don't have to go to even go to community college. You can literally be an apprentice right out of high school, come in and have a great job and have a great career.
I just got off a panel with opioid addictions. And this is to not any particular person, what's your take on beginning to solve that, and how would you, as a business person, how would you start the ball to try to unravel that issue? And Mr. Hitt, I'll start with you.
Well, I think we need programs that, obviously add a mental health element to the hiring and training issues that we have. I mean, clearly, you know where I stand on this. I mean, you fall into these huge crises in our country when people are feeling disenfranchised. There's a reason we have an opioid conflict. It just didn't pop up. It comes from a lack of opportunity and a feeling of disenfranchisement. And I think that there's some failed leadership in our business communities. There's probably some failed leadership, overall in the country, in this entire area. You can't just have people on the coast being wonderfully prosperous and people around middle America not being prosperous. And so I do think this comes down to programs that, again, move people where the opportunity is and create incentives for opportunities where they do live so we can create better jobs for them there. Then you can work on the training element of it, and through the training element of it, certainly mental health has to be a part of that. We don't do a great job in this country in the mental health area. It's an area that we should be focusing on more. If anybody in the room has any experience in it, with children or family members, you probably understand the frustration, of trying to get the appropriate help for people that are, addicted to something or depressed or have anxiety disorders. These are big issues, and they're not solved with a snap of the finger. So real leadership has to come. And I think it comes back to incentivizing business to step in and work with both local and state governments and the federal government to help solve these problems, get people in jobs, the dignity and respect that comes with a job, the ability to go home and actually enjoy your weekend with your family, instead of going to work the second or third job to try to make ends meet where you are and you become critically underemployed. I mean, it's a very vicious circle, that's there. So that's how I would address it, Congressman.
Anybody else want to take a pop at that?
Sure. I deal with recovering addicts all the time. And so I guess, again, what we've started to do, at least with the reentry programs where people have been recently released from incarceration, we try to connect those folks with the folks that are currently going through a stage in their addiction. Addressing it first, I guess, you know, a lot of times in the culture, people have to reach their bottom. But if you're trying to address it positively, I think you just have to keep in tune with the outreach, understand why, you know, different folks are getting high or seeking to get high, and then really connecting them to the multiple choice of what happens if you continue to get high. There are all types of programs out there, and the ones that are successful are the ones that have people that have joined that haven't been forced by their parole officer or by a judge or by a priest or by a family member. The most successful programs that I work with are the ones that people have hit rock bottom and want to make a change. And so then when you talk to people that are currently using, at least it's been my experience, you just continue to encourage them to make better choices and give them better options out there, whether that be in entertainment, horticulture, art, different things and different hobbies. A lot of times when we talk to particularly young people, they don't feel that they have a lot of options. There's a lot of depression, and I know it personally because I've raised a child with depression. So, you know, you really have to really have this honest assessment, and you have to deal with it. You know, you have to deal with it directly. And again, I guess what we're trying to do, and in a lot of ways we've reached some success, is that we connect folks that have gone through addiction and are on the other side of it, and we continue to talk to the people that are going through it currently.
Great. I'm out of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ralph. I'd like to yield to Stephanie Murphy of Florida.
Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. And Mr. McCright, I appreciate you showing us a sample of how virtual reality can be integrated for training. I represent a district in Orlando that is known for being the hub of modeling, simulation, and training. And there are a number of companies there that build those machines or technology, just like the one that you showed, to train people in the healthcare space for military purposes and a variety of other jobs. And so I think it's an exciting space that we're probably likely to see more of as we look at workforce training. But my question, you know, we've held a similar hearing here on this committee where we discuss the possible causes of this persistent skill gap problem, labor force job gap issue. And one idea is that schools might not be adequately preparing students with the exact skills that they need for specific jobs. And on the other side, it appears that there's a guessing game that students have to play as far as what jobs might exist. So as they try to figure out what to go to school for, they're not quite sure what the demand signal on the other side is. And so it suggests that there's a communications gap between higher ed and industry, or our educational institutions and industry. And in fact, in 2012, a McKinsey report found that 72% of higher education institutions believe that graduates are fully prepared for the workforce, and only 42% of employers agree. So what kinds of things do you think we can do to close this gap, better prepare our students, also give them a better sense of what the demand signals are from industry? Kind of open question.
I'll start. I think that you know there's to me there's two skills gaps. There's the technical skills gap, which I showed on the forklift of how we would address that, and then we also see what we call it a soft skill gap or basic skills, and it's things that you just would not think you would have to teach someone, which is showing up for work on time and not walking off a job, or if you're going to be out, calling in advance, and things that probably many of us were just inherent in maybe whether the way we were raised or our culture. And, you know, so we find that we're having to teach that, which is really surprising as an employer. You wouldn't think you would have to do that. And I do think that the K through 12 could address that in some form or manner, and whether it's job readiness or how they would do that rather than the employers. I think probably most of us have stories of that we just can't believe that these people don't understand kind of the basic 101 of working.
I think that public schools can do a better job of discussing post-secondary training options, but the better solution is creating more opportunity for public and private efforts. Schools should have relationships with local training institutions that can talk about what students can expect in their programs and what kind of positions and salaries they can attain with training. We're going to be participating with a program, as I sit here and think about it, with 1199C, again, with high school students. And so getting them more involved on at least 4 days out of a work week. And again, in my workspace, in terms of workers, at least caregivers, are in a situation where they are, in a lot of ways, highly unsupervised. But when we talk about soft skills too, I think another thing that we talk about, again, with young people a lot of times with the seniors is just general courtesy, a good morning, good afternoon, putting down the cell phones. We've almost gotten to a culture, at least in my place, where the cell phones are a big no-no in the workplace because people can't live without them. But when you talk to young people, we try to tell them we don't want to talk to the top of your head, we want to talk to your face. And it's reinforced in our workforce because, again, we're connecting a lot of times this intergenerational vibe where we're putting a young person into a senior's home. And for me, the struggle is twofold. One, there are not a lot of people standing in a long line to be a caregiver to help people for the low salary that we can offer because of the Medicaid rate. But the other part of it is too, a lot of the young people are, I don't want to say entitled so much as uninformed. And the attention span of trying to keep them sometimes engaged, because it's not my only workforce. I supervise probably 4 generations of folk. And so really, again, just having diversity and inclusion, but soft skills training, more intern programs, and really making it more attractive for employers like myself to get involved with kind of training programs, creating some type of benefit for that.
Thank you. I'm gonna yield back.
All right, I get now to yield to my boss, the chairman of the full committee, Steve Shabbat, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I apologize if any of the questions I asked have already been asked. I had another hearing going on, which I have to go back to, but Small Business Committee is the most important committee in Congress, so those others can wait. That's my attitude, and I know that's the others as well. The first question I'd like to ask is kind of relative to the education system. It seems like obviously, parents, at least a lot of us, perhaps have encouraged our young folks over the years that a 4-year college is absolutely critical nowadays. But in reality, obviously, there's a lot of jobs and opportunities out there that don't require a 4-year degree, a 2-year community college degree or vocational degree or a technical certification of some sort or another. And if you could, whoever would like to, just kind of address that issue and perhaps how we ought to look at that either differently or more thoughtfully, or just kind of as a society. Are we pushing too many of our young people into 4-year liberal arts degrees when perhaps there are other alternatives to that? Anybody like to address that?
I'm going to go ahead and jump in so
you.
I have a chance to respond. I think a lot of it is about what the panel has said today, redefining the American dream. What does it mean to have it all? Because I think have it all now can be a home that you can pay for, and children you can clothe, and food you can buy. And there is a housing shortage, but the stigma does start with how you're raised, and I think business can do a lot about that. If you put yourself out in the community and you connect, and like when we got Business of the Year, I made sure we talked about that a lot, so that's something they can talk about around the table and say, hey, I wonder what they're doing down there, and make it seem or it make people realize that there's opportunities that aren't four-year colleges. In the educational system, I just had a son graduate. No one talked to him about any other choices other than college. And at graduation, the kids that didn't go to college, they didn't even announce what their future plans were going to be. And I think we could really glorify that and make it seem better by the fact that if the federal government thinks it's important enough to increase Pell Grants or technical colleges or vocational schools get more money, then it must be a really big need. And I think when there's a lot said about millennials that is not kind, but I do think they go where they're needed. They feel a draw to being needed and being part of a bigger picture and being part of something that's successful. And I know when we wanted to get, when we want more employees, I realized I had to reintroduce ourselves to the community because the image we had was old and dated. And so what we did was ask the employees, what's important to you? What's important to your kids? Where should we be? We pay our employees to volunteer in the community. People see that and they say, wow, I'd like to be part of that. And I think that same energy can be put towards vocational schools and technical colleges, or, really on-the-job training is huge. There's nothing that can be offered at a vocational school that we need other than like forklift training. Everything we teach is on the job. But I would love it if somebody in K through 12 would have a life skills class so they know how to balance a checkbook and get to school or get to work on time and realize they have to bring a lunch with them. No one's going to give them lunch at work. And there's so many things that they really don't know. And I can say that without, being smug because my son's one of them. The first day he showed up for a summer internship, he didn't understand why there wasn't a lunch for him, just because everywhere else he had worked had been so generous and things like that. So I think there's a lot of things they don't know, and I agree. It is not because they're entitled; they're just completely uninformed. And I think a lot of it comes from the support they get at home, what they see. Maybe both parents are super busy and they don't have time to show them that. So as business leaders and elected officials, we have to show them what's important in life and what matters and what will get them recognition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back my time. Thank you.
Well, I think we couldn't have had a better panel today. I appreciate we covered, I think, the full spectrum of all the issues in the closing. That was fantastic testimony you just gave that I think will give us plenty to think about and to move forward on. And that's why we do hold these panels. We do seek your input out from the business community, and we're going to prepare another round and zoom in until we hit the target and solve the problem. And so I want to again thank all of our panelists today for coming in, sharing your time and expertise. I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days to submit statements and supporting materials for the record. Without objection, so ordered. This hearing is now adjourned, and thank you again very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really nice to meet you.